story of the great Luke Kelly touches on many things. Of course, it's primarily a story of music, but it's also a story of the arts in the broadest sense. Luke was an actor, and you can't really have an understanding of Luke without having an understanding of that fact. Deirdre O'Connell, his partner for many years, was behind the brilliant Focus Theatre in Dublin. And at the recent Luke Kelly Festival, I had the privilege of talking about Deirdre and the Focus with Sabina Higgins, who, as Sabina Coyne, was a really pioneering figure in the world of Deirdre O'Connell and the much celebrated Focus Theatre. My thanks to everyone at the Luke Kelly Festival for the invitation to have this discussion, and to Sabina for allowing me to record it. She's a real champion of the legacy of Deirdre O'Connell. Hope you enjoyed this one. Thank you so much for your patience. There's a good bit of editing when you record anything outside, but I think this is a really good listen. Luke's life, of course, is defined by music, but theatre was a core part of it as well. It's not for nothing that Luke Kelly sang so brilliantly, vocal techniques learned from Ewan MacColl, himself a man of the theatre. So Luke's story, I would argue, is incomplete without that of Deirdre O'Connell, founder of the really influential Focus Theatre. And in one of the final acts of the Higgins presidency, the site of the Focus Theatre was marked by a plaque. One of the centrally important figures in the story of the Focus Theatre is Sabina Higgins. A big boolabus, please. A national treasure. And who, as Sabina Coyne, was one of those who made Deirdre's vision for the theatre a reality. So today we're talking about one of the most important, not the biggest, but one of the most important Irish theatres historically. Sabina, before we get into Deirdre O'Connell and the Focus, I think it's always good when you're talking to an actor to get a sense of what brought you to acting. Like, can you give a sense of your journey? What plays were you looking at, or what made you think, I want to do that?
Well, I hadn't been looking at many plays because this was 1963, and I was born in 1941, and I was living down the country, so there were very few plays. Maybe in Lent there would be plays on, and that. So it was just. I had such a love of literature, of reading. I was a prodigious reader from one since I was little, you know, and my mother was a great storyteller, so she told us all the stories of Dickens and everything. And then when I went to well, I loved all Little Women and all the usual ones. But when I went to secondary school then, and we had these wonderful uh, uh, poetry books and essays for both Gentry Cert and Leaving Cert, with all the great writers in the canon, they were there. And I particularly loved the romantics of Shelley and Byron and Keats. I just so loved that when I went to Dublin to work in the Land Commission, I just wanted to keep on that. It was needs to me. So I went to there was a People's College at the time. I went to a few things in that, and I went to thing voice production and stagecraft at Brendan Smith Academy. And then it was at the time that um, the method was in vogue, and it was, I don't know, it was a mutiny on the Bounty or on the waterfront. And Marlon Brando it was playing in that. So it was all of the talk about that. And next thing is, we get word that somebody from the actor studio in New York, which is where Marlon Brando and every James Dean and Rod Steiger, everyone, that they were coming to Dublin, and that she was going to set up an actor teacher, an actor training thing. So that was so exciting, because nothing we had before that was just voice production or the poetry. But this was so. We went down, and she set it up in the Pocket Theatre in Ely Place. So we went down and started there, and first people were Tom Hickey and Timmy MacDonald and that. So that was to be a new revolutionary system of actor training, because it didn't believe in Ireland you could train
Yeah.
That it was you either could do it or couldn't. It was just instinctual. But the idea that somebody would train and that you'd get the tools to develop your creativity, that was not acceptable and was not welcomed at all. But anyway, that was the wonderful thing that happened, that Deirdre O'Connell came because her people had been
Yeah.
Irish.
So Deirdre was born in the Bronx in 1939. As you say, she got into the same studio as James Dean, as Marlon Brando. What kind of unusual figure was she in the Dublin of that time? She represented this new, very bohemian approach to theatre.
Well, I wouldn't say she was an extraordinary, beautiful, in an unusual sort of way woman. She was so striking. Everybody just looked at her. She had this glorious, strong red hair piled on top of her head. And she had very pale, creamy skin and just these beautiful eyes. And she spoke in the softest, most gentle of voices. And that continued forever. It was just amazing that everybody was treated as if they were the most delicate little flower or creature on the planet. She was
Mm.
love. And of course, she had spent so much time in training and was a major actor on and off Broadway. But she was brought this way of bringing the creative arts people. And that is, we, everybody was just overcome. And everybody that ever went to study with her, they were all said the same. It was life changing. They were never the same again after being. It just opened a whole world, a whole way of being, a whole way of touching, getting in touch with oneself. And she was like, she was love. She just knew how to teach.
She was also a magnificent singer, and you talked about hearing her singing on the radio. She moved in that milieu, that social milieu that had grown up around O'Donoghue's. But the social picture of Dublin at that time is so interesting. You've got the ballad boom in O'Donoghue's. You've got Guy's Restaurant, where the feminist politics of the day were coming to the fore. It was a very exciting city to be young in and to be progressive in.
Well, now. There'd be many, 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 many different views on how Dublin was at the end of the 50s and after we'd been through the 30s, and it hadn't changed much. But it was very much establishment
Yeah.
and nobody outside that. Yeah, I mean, our early plays, the reviewers didn't even come.
Hmm.
We were not worthy of it. And in fact, when the theatre opened, Gabriel Fallon, who was a major visit, and it wasn't welcomed, you see. And he said his view and it was, are we putting too few eggs in too many baskets? Meaning there's no room for another for a theatre in Dublin. And that was that was the Ireland. We were very Catholic, very authoritarian, very limited. And I mean, this is before contraception or the women's movement or anything. And people were very restricted
Hmm.
in what they could do or say. So this was really, it didn't matter because the people who came and studied with Deirdre, this was so wonderful and so revolutionary. And what we were learning, or doing.
Dublin had a long tradition of tiny, tiny little theatres. So I think about the Pike Theatre, where Waiting for Godot got its English premiere and Behan got his premiere. Apparently, in that theatre, it was so small that actors had to stand in the laneway and wait for their turn to come up on stage. The Focus wasn't a very large theatre either. Can you give a sense of the scale of what we're talking about here?
Yeah, there was 72. There was no theatre. There was no subsidy. There was no money from the state or anything. The only one that got the established one was the Abbey. And even when we had developed doing improvisational theatre, and we had been moved from the Pocket around to different places, the Dag Hall in Westland Road, the Pike, and then eventually in the Fitzwilliam Square, the Shakespearean Company. And there we were able to do public improvisations. And they were like plays that in our training, but people thought they were actually from playwrights, but they were being made up by us as we went. It was a whole, a whole technique of the improvisations. And they had great following of people coming on to them. And they were just marvelous. And sometimes we did a series a series of that would be to do with the issues of the day. We were very much the Ips in that line. So the issues of the day on education, on unemployment, and when we'd say when we brought the Doll's House, when we toured with it around the country to the big towns, we would do the improvisations as well, and that was new. They'd never seen that you to do it, and to know that it was a play we had made up there. Nothing was, you had put this, for given circumstances, the issue that was to be explored and the different characters there were. But was from then, say, when the curtain was back, we were on. And when somebody started it and it went on, and it was absolutely just terrific. Now, it was one of the greatest enjoyments of everyone that went through Focus was doing those. And for the audience, they loved it. So it wasn't really until then we knew we had to try to get a theatre, for like you were saying, that is of our own, or someplace where we could put on plays. So it started the thing of having to find a place. We spent years going around to every basement in Dublin and to found this used factory in Pembroke Lane, and then Declan Kennedy and Dick Callan kind of took the thing in hand, and the Burke Kennedys and Mick McCarthy from the Embankment. The Burke Kennedy architect designed it, and the Mick McCarthy from the Embankment, because we used to do improvisations out there, and they were all, of course, big fans of Luke Kelly, and Luke Kelly was a huge. I mean, he was he was a big benefactor, and we didn't know until afterwards that he had put up a lot of the money, because we did big fundraising things with meals and with giving seats, and people, if they spent £10 to buy a seat in the thing, they had admission for life to the plays. I've gone on
Well,
too
for
long.
anyone who doesn't know, Mick McCarthy was an extraordinary character. He'd been at the Battle of Capel Street in London. He runs this big space out in the foothills of the Dublin Mountains and Tala, the Embankment. He convinces Micheál McLeamore to bring his one-man show about Oscar Wilde out to Tala. He brings the Dubliners out. It's the place to be, the Embankment. It was a very thriving place.
Amazing. Just a little incident, digress. Who was there on the night, when the nights we were doing the improvisations there? Brendan Behan's mother was there. What's this, her name?
Kathleen.
Kathleen. And she was amazed that this was the play that we were making up the play. And she kept saying, very uncommon, very uncommon.
Brilliant. I often think about Bertolt Brecht had that great line. He said, art is not a mirror held up to society. It's a hammer with which to shape us. And clearly that idea was in the focus as well, that this theatre was going to change the way people felt about the world and their place in it.
Well, just the way, by the technique of people discovering their creativity. And that is the biggest communication really there is between people, on a stage, and that. And when the techniques and that she gave, that you could fulfill the inner as well as the outer life of the person and bring it to life. So that was what was kind of unique and was hugely appreciated by them, except our theatre was so small and with no subsidy. We got £300 to build, to help the theatre. That was all that came. And after years and years of that, they agreed to subsidise, this is not from the Arts Council and the government, to subsidise loss on advertising to the tune of £500. That was all, after years and doing great plays and there being everything recognised, but that was all. And we had a block because we were not big enough to be able to pay wages, big wages. What we had was a sharing. We paid in every week ourselves. That paid Deirdre for her to be able to live and to pay for all the lights and everything else, and anything else was that we got it. But that was how it survived.
So essentially, like a workers' cooperative, it was run on that
It
basis.
was. Well, it was just for love of the thing, and we were, people wanted and knew the value of this. So that was really such a pity, because in the end, that's what caused her to close
Yeah.
in 2012. They wouldn't give the Arts Council wouldn't give the bit of money that would have paid for the rent, and they just let it
Hmm.
go. But the legacy is so amazing. Brian McAvera in his book says the DNA of Deirdre O'Connell and her system, the Sun, is everywhere,
Hmm.
in all the education, in all communities, in all the social thinking, because the actors that trained with her, they went on to be writers, painters, a lot in education, in medicine, in everything. They brought this with them, and in fact, it's a big part now of training in mental health. These relationships and the improvisational kind of uh, adopting different relationships with people. So really, she just it couldn't be estimated what Deirdre O'Connell brought to Ireland and to its people it is just so wonderful. And it goes on. I mean, when the little plaque that we got eventually that they put up outside, the people that have now taken over our Focus Theatre, the little plaque that was there, Pembroke Lane, which was where the theatre was full. And they were all past pupils of Deirdre's, actors, directors, theatre theatre people, writers, and a lot the film. It's been the greatest thing for film.
Hmm.
Film goer, producers, directors, actors, everything. So it was wonderful. There was a whole laneway of people that were Deirdre O'Connell's her children, as she called it. We were her children. And we were family. We all was considered that we were family, and still are. I mean, to Tom Hickey, to me, and all of that. There's still, it's like you said, the
Yeah.
DNA, and that is there. It was a wonderful um, training in how to love and how to be, how we treat each other, how society and how communities and how it can be. It was really
In
yeah.
in Des Gerrity's biography of Luke, Deirdre was asked, how did Luke sing and the way he sang, and she said, he was an actor. That's what set him apart. Every song he sang, he interpreted. The influence of her and the theatre on Luke. You talked about hearing Luke, for example, preparing his voice to sing. He really was an actor in a folk band, wasn't he?
Oh, well, he was. He was, of course he did. Jesus Christ Superstar, but he was. And as was Liam Clancy. They were interpreting. And Luke was a wonderful, hugely read person, and, was always developing. In fact, one of the things that Deirdre told me about one of the first discussions she had, Luke, was on tests of the D'Urbervilles. And nobody would think that Luke Kelly was reading Thomas Hardyman, but he was hugely read, and he was in all of the socialist literature and everything. He
Brilliant.
was very fine.
You mentioned that the press initially kind of ignored the focus and it was hard to get eyes onto it. That changed over time. I think probably the sheer quality of what was being put on couldn't be ignored. And just two things people said about the focus I think are brilliant. Con Houlihan, better remembered as a sports writer, but also a great writer on literature and the theatre. He said, when you went to the focus, you were looking at life. You weren't looking at theatre at all. And then Mary Kenny said that Deirdre's high art approach to drama was so different from the usual Dublin quick to mock attitude to everything. So it does seem that there were people there in the press who were
Oh, well,
saying
that is
this
what
matters.
gave, and that there were. I mean, Finnegan in the Evening Press, he was some of the very established ones that were in the big theatres. they didn't want to, no, but gradually, but people like J.J. Finnegan, who was in the evening press at the time, but he was very perceptive, and they, as I say, the furrow, Alec Reid, who was there, like he had great admiration for the Focus, and in fact, when we did um the
Happy Days.
Happy Days, we did a lot of Beckett, and he said we just moved Beckett from being this kind of ranting thing to being understandable. He could bring out the reason and the everything, and made him that you could participate in the, and so he did great. It did great service to the understanding of the Beckett. But Happy Days, I have to say, was just so fantastic. It was wonderful. Happy Days, where she's buried up into her neck. She starts being buried to her bust, and then gradually, and she's everything yet, but she has such a will that she keeps going. Her doing of that was just the most phenomenal. So we all know it kind of off by heart still, because those Beckett things, they're for everything. They would keep coming back. And it's true. When you have the things, they do come back to help you through the day, and they're just great to recall.
He could be a tricky character. Sometimes he wanted to really know how his work was being performed. Do you know if Deirdre had to write the psalm in Paris or anything to get permission to do that work?
Yeah, I didn't know. I didn't know that, but I know that to get who wrote Exiles, James Joyce. We had it all ready to go on, and it had never been done. The Exiles play, and it was wonderful, wonderful play, and at the last minute, um, they refused us the rights to it, which was a great pity. Somebody had gone and bought the rights, and then it couldn't be given out. So it was, but it was pity.
So you didn't get to make Joyce, but I'm looking over the list: Samuel Beckett, Tennessee Williams, Chekhov. But really, your name became kind of synonymous with Ibsen. It was also a massive influence on Joyce. That was the play that you went back to all the time.
Well, Ibsen was the great one that changed it from the mannerisms theatre of the 19th century. Ibsen was all of the great plays of dealing with people and their conflict that they were in with the repressive society, and their efforts to, so that's conflict. And all of his plays, I think we must have done about 10 of them. The Enemy of the People, we'll say, was where the city council, they know the water is poisoned, but they want to go ahead with the thing. And this school teacher and his wife, they know and they object. And in fact, they are stoned out of their house because. So it was all about people wanting to improve things or do things and have openness and accountability. So we did a lot of them. Well, I told you about the Doll's House, about it was D1 in the women's movement, yeah, and that we did it, and we played for 20 weeks, and it was a huge success. And every Friday night, we had somebody who was involved promoting the women's movement. They came and they chaired the panel, and there were fantastic discussions. So we played for 20 weeks like that, and then we brought it all around the country, from Wexford, Cork, Galway, Limerick, everywhere. And at the second part of it in the evening, we would do one of our improvisations, which I was saying people had never seen or heard of one, and that were amazed that it was a play, which means they could create their own plays, that the techniques were there. But no, Ibsen, Strindberg, Chekhov, which did all of it, all Arthur Miller's plays, and Tennessee Williams.
For you as an actor, there was, I suppose, theatre. No one goes into theatre to get rich, right? So actors are doing different things, and you did some work on television, and you were involved in an absolutely amazing television production in the 1960s called Insurrection, which was for the 50th anniversary of the 1916 Rising. maybe the greatest thing RTE ever made. Absolutely fantastic
No,
program.
and I was very lucky to get that. I had done a play called Women on an Island about a pregnant girl that goes off by Eugene McCabe. It was his first one. So Louis Lenton had directed me in that. So he asked me to play this Julia Grennan, in the GPO. There are two women where
Elizabeth O'Farrell,
Elizabeth
Julia
O'Farrell, and then you had the the girl
Winnie Carney.
Willie Carney. She came down from Belfast. She was the secretary to Jim Connolly. So I was playing in that, and Elizabeth and I were the nurses in it. So it was so good. It was done right. Hugh Leonard wrote it,
Yeah.
and Louis Lenton was a wonderful producer, and he produced it. And they had all of these characters, but they were based on the people that were there at the time. So when I don't know if any of you see it, but you really could do it. It was a day by day. It was a revolutionary thing that Ray McAnally, who was a great actor, he reported from the scene of every day as it happened from day one, from going into, was wonderful. We broke the windows and went into the GPO, and I remember it so well. It was terrific. But every day, and we met all of Sean McDermott and
But it's amazing, an amazing
everyone.
approach.
Everyone. It was, but all of there were the real people, and it was based on as much as could be learned of that was all known. So what was so great about it was this.
The idea of watching the Rising as a breaking news story in real time is just absolutely fantastic
And
television.
going across to Moore Street, rushing across with the things coming in that, and with the fire, when the fire and the beams were falling down, and the actors were getting out of the way of it. The fire when it was burned at the end. But it was a great achievement for RTE for that.
I remember the poet Paula Meehan talking about 1966 and growing up at that time, and she says there was so much nationalism around you in 1966. You just wanted to go out and die for Ireland. But Insurrection was one of her abiding memories of it too. On theatre more broadly, we're only a stone's throw here from the North Circular Road, the home where Sean O'Casey wrote the Dublin trilogy. And you really have championed O'Casey in recent years, and you clearly feel great affection towards Sean O'Casey and his work.
I think he is the greatest Irish playwright, you could say. He was the one who had Ibsen, in his books, the ones where they laugh about the wild goose and the doll's house. But he really understood, because he was a socialist himself and a revolutionary. So he really understood the drama. He was really that brought that kind of drama to here, rather than the kind of mannerisms and all of the things. What's so important was that when he wrote Plough the Stars, Shadow of a Gunman, Shadow of a Gunman, what's
Juno and the Paycock.
Juno and the Paycock, and then of course the Silver Tassie and all of that. But it is, in my mind, it was what connected us emotionally to the Rising and to the people that were there. He hasn't been recognised enough in Ireland, and this was 422 North Circular Road. And as a serendipity, this was the anniversary of him writing the plays. In 2024 was the year, and we did huge. And so Christopher Murray, who was a great biographer, such a huge group lobbying the government and lobbying, and every Lord Mayor that was there, from Niall Ring down to everyone, they all supported the fact that the government, the state, should buy 422, and we wanted to make it into a cultural centre in that. But unfortunately, at the time, it was on for 400,000, and thought it was bought. And next thing is somebody comes in and it was 600,000, and then it went more, and as it was now, and we should have gone on, but we did as much as we could, and it wasn't bought. And maybe things come around. It might come around again that we get it, but it would have been a wonderful achievement for North City and for the country to have it. And we wanted a statue to Deirdre, not a statue or some kind of a public commemoration of Deirdre O'Connell, hopefully.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because
that's,
when we talk about Dublin as a UNESCO World City of Literature,
yeah.
that instantly recalls the books that makes us think of Ulysses or Dracula or whatever it may be. But the theatre is part of that status of
Oh,
Dublin being a literary city.
absolutely.
It's a literary expression.
Yeah.
I'm conscious that we've people in the crowd who may have connections to the Focus Theatre. And I've one or two questions to go, but it'd be nice to go to the floor if anyone has recollections of the Focus, whether they were on stage or in the audience. Ken has his hand up. So I give you this mic.
Yeah, thank you. Now and again, Deirdre would appoint me the tea boy for the green room, and the green room was like my granny's scullery. Yeah, so I did Marietta biscuits and a cup of tea, during the break. And years later, Tim MacDonald, I helped Tim set up a youth theatre. He was really into workshops for the kids,
Yeah.
and I had done work in the Dublin Youth Theatre, and I was helping him to raise some funds. But the Arts Council came along and said, "Listen, Ken, we don't do social realism." So even at the later time before Tim died, we was being refused funding because it was left wing politics,
Yeah.
essentially. But what was interesting about our little green room was what was on the wall, the photograph was a Luke Kelly. The Luke Kelly photograph was always in the green room. Yeah, if you remember.
Oh yes, well that is still there. That portrait, as is the portrait of Deirdre O'Connell. Now I'm looking after that at the moment because we're hoping that the National Gallery, that now that they're wanting more interested in having women on the wall, that we're hoping. So I have left it with Jackie Moore to see can she get it to go up there. It was by a great friend of Focus. So Brian Burke was there from the start, really, with us, with all of when the arts kind of place started. Brian was there from the start with us, as was John Behan, who was a great, absolutely great friend, and in fact did the plaque for the thing we did for the Plough and the Stars and the Auras, that he did the stars, the stars to put on top of the plough, which was given to us by the ploughing champion that had been ploughing champion every year, the ploughing champion. So I got that from him, and John Behan designed the thing. So this was for the lockout. So we have a beautiful sculpture to of the Plough and the Stars up in the Auras.
I'm Deirdre O'Connell's sister, and we were all born in the South Bronx of New York. And the reason for that was that my dad was an anti-treatyite, and after the treaty was signed, he wouldn't live in Ireland. So he went to America, and he met my mother, who was from County Cork, who was also an anti-treatyite, and they married, and we were all born in the South Bronx. Now, the South Bronx was just across the river from Harlem, so anybody who didn't have an education or a way of making a living could work on the docks. And so the Irish were all working on the docks because most of them didn't have even a primary school education. And so my dad became a union organizer on the docks for all the Irish that were working there. And he used to take us together at night and tell us the whole history of the uprising. And he would end up every evening by saying to us, "I couldn't live there, but you can. I couldn't live there, but you can." And so we all grew up knowing that even though we were born in America, we were going to come back to Ireland. And so my brother was Robert Emmett. Another brother was Kevin Barry. I was Geraldine from the Geraldines. It was a tribe. Then we had Deirdre of the Sorrows, who was Eleanor. And then we had the only one who was actually called out to anybody in the family was Greta, who was Margaret. And so when we were old enough, we knew that we were coming back to Ireland because my parents couldn't live here, but we could. And so we came back, and Deirdre founded, as was told earlier, the acting school in Dublin. And she was an amazing person who had nothing, who absolutely, herself and Luke Kelly had absolutely nothing. And I hope my children grow up to be like Deirdre and Luke.
Can I speak there? Yeah. Well, Deirdre came to Ireland with the mission of bringing this acting system of being trained to be creative actors and to bring the Stanislavski system, which was the great thing that had gone from the Moscow Arts Theatre to Europe and then to the America, where at the Actors Studio, where everybody, Marlon Brando and everyone now, all over the world, it is Stanislavski's system. But that she came because she felt there was something she could bring of benefit to the Irish people, and she came. And she stayed by that steadfastly against all the things she had to put up with and all deprivations and everything. She determined to do that. So that's why we are eternally grateful to her. Thank you.
Sabina, I'm just here in front of you on your right. I'm just here. In 1965, you were a bridesmaid at the wedding of Deirdre and Luke Kelly. Have you any recollections of that day that you would like to share with us?
Oh, well, it was a wonderful day. All the Dubliners were there and everything. And Deirdre she always wore black. I was saying that to you earlier. She always, I say she was the most extraordinary, striking person, as I was saying about her. But also, she wore black all the time. And she wore her skirts about 2 inches below the knees. And she wore shoes that had a thick heel. They were like Spanish dancers' shoes. And she had these most beautiful, gorgeous, slim legs and hands. I mean, she was a really extraordinary, beautiful, person to look at, and this hair. But where was I talking about there?
The wedding.
Oh, the wedding. Oh, so at the wedding, she was still wearing the black. And the wedding happened because she was going back to play in New York or something, and Luke was afraid that she mightn't come back. So said you would get married before you go. So she had this beautiful, all her black, which Emmett brought her in to Brown Thomas. And they bought this beautiful little white jacket that she wore. And she wore white tights, white stockings. And she wore a white gardenia in her hair. And she said, I'll change it every hour. So, so it was a fantastic. I was up in Whitehall, where Luke was from, was where the wedding took place, and all of the Dubliners were there playing them in and playing them out, and it was magnificent. I remember I was wearing a blue velvet dress that I had beautiful, fabulous lace that had been the trimming on one of the beds in our house at home. You know how they used to make it, and I made the collar and the cuffs from that. So it was really a fabulous day, and all of the focus and all of everybody was there. Luke used to keep saying to Deirdre, "Aren't you glad you came? Aren't you glad you came?"
Brilliant. If we can end, Sabina, with a kind of big question. The story of Irish theatre is much more than Yeats and the Abbey. It's the little theatres. It's the Pike Theatre. It's the Focus Theatre. It's the Sheridan Brothers in the project. It's Operating Theatre. It's all these people who tried to do a lot with very little. What are your feelings on where Irish theatre is now, and your hope for Irish theatre going forward?
Well, I don't know. I'm 84. So there's so much, and now we have dedicated theatre training colleges and all kinds of things. I mean, we played in Trinity, and we did William Butler Yeats's Calvary. But since then, like Trinity has, all of the colleges have great programs, and they're all mostly founded one way or another on the Stanislavski system. You know, it's not the support that needs to be at all yet for the creative arts, but they know now it's one of the biggest parts of the finances of the country. It comes from the creative arts, from the film thing, from everything. So they know it's what we're all living on. Really, is the product of from the creative arts. So I have no doubt that it will continue. So there's wonderful generations coming along, and that are just absolutely dedicated to humanity and to making, like, I remember once in Paris meeting Edna O'Brien, and she said, "And what do you really want?" And I said, "I want to save the world." And she said, "So do I. So do I."
Well,
So we have a bigger job now than ever if we want to save our poor little planet even. Get rid of the armaments history. Get it known that there is no longer any justification for war. No war. No war. That's where we're to get to. Yeah.
that is why plays like The Silver Tassie and work like that lives forever, because it speaks to the world that we live in today. And if you want to support the little theatres, the new theatre in the back of Connolly Books, the theatres and community centres and over pubs and under pubs and under offices, the best way to support them is to buy a ticket and to go along. So we'll all recommit ourselves to supporting the arts. Thank you so much to Sabina for bringing us on that journey. I know some of the organisers of the festival are here.
Thank you all for listening.
And so wonderful to put Deirdre in this festival. And we'd like to present some flowers to Sabina.
Thank you.